Hello, everybody. It's fight night once again. UFC 261 taking place tonight from Jacksonville, Florida. It is the first UFC event with a full capacity crowd in over a year. ViStar Veterans Memorial Arena. That's the same arena which they came back from their 2 month COVID hiatus last year. So once again, I am Talvano, according to Woods. Once again, joining me as he does for every pay-per-view preview stream here. And how are you doing today, this afternoon, good sir?
We're doing great. We're damn emptying the bench. Literally emptying the bench. We're fan siding the ViStar Arena. Damn it. We had the Super Bowl, obviously in Tampa, Super Bowl and 2 days of Mania, or the first night of WrestleRania, as both Corey Graves, Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler said. I mean, it's amazing. Nobody got the COVID, so I'm glad of that. So we've got ViStar with fans, and I didn't know. Before this, I didn't know that Jacksonville and the ViStar Arena was a hotbed for the UFC. Hopefully, it's not a hotbed of COVID for the UFC, but we'll see.
I mean, I just made this comparison because we just had episode 82 of Empty the Bench. You know what I think of when I think of this event and the warning on the back of the tickets about the COVID risk? I think of the scene from Shrek where Lord Farquaad is on top of the castle. The knights are about to do battle with the winner going to save Princess Fiona. And he says, "Some of you may die, but it is a sacrifice I am willing to make."
Yeah, exactly. That he who won't see battle and what have you. Now, mind you, the Dana White has been pretty much consistent in terms of his attitude. He literally craps on anybody that tests positive for COVID, throws them to the wolves, right? But has been consistent, whether it be ViStar Arena the first time, Fight Island, UFC Apex, all this jazz, and not wearing a mask. So there's that.
I was gonna say, I mean, credit to them for being one of the first ones back from the COVID pandemic. Credit to them for this card that they're gonna be giving us. Credit to them for having a fans back. But I'll be watching this from my home here in New York. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me. I mean, when they get to come back to New York, when there's a media event that pops up, maybe I'll find myself popping back up. But for now, while COVID's still going on and they're still limited in their travel, because next week they're going to be back at the Apex with no fans for the fight
Mm-hmm.
night. So, but yeah, we got a stat card for tonight. We got 13 fights, uh, 4 on each portion of the preliminaries, 5 on the main card. Of course, 3 title fights. And if you want me to be brutally honest, we'll start from the bottom. We will start with the bottom with the early prelims, but going ahead here, I am way more excited for the 2 women's title fights than I am for our main event tonight.
I agree. And, it's funny because another show, Voodoo in the Woods with Pius Inilalobo, better known as Voodoo Maximus, former U of MMA champ, and crazy. We picked a lot of our fight of the night candidates or performance of the night candidates actually happening on either the early prelims or the prelims. So I think when you set a stat card, they are absolutely making sure that they hold up to their end of the bargain.
Definitely. Definitely. And this is definitely a card where you see a lot of potential. I'll say a lot of potential that in up and comers in these divisions. So we'll start things off with a strawweight matchup. It is Ariane Carnelasi and Na Liang. So looking at the tail of the tape, Liang has a 3-inch reach advantage. I mean, 3-inch height advantage and a big 6-inch reach advantage. Looking at their last performances, so Na Liang, I believe this is going to be her UFC debut. Yes, it is a product of the WLF Wars promotion over in China, which a bunch of combatants tonight making their UFC debut are from that promotion. And Liang comes in on a 4-fight win streak, 6 wins in her last 7. Some of the competition she has faced, though, I mean, not a lot. Like her last fight was against a 0-0 fighter and a 2-0 fighter. 2-2 fighter, 4-2. Liang definitely decent with her striking, decent with her grappling, taking on Carnelasi. So we take a look at Carnelasi, a product of Inside Muay Thai. ended up losing her last fight. That was against Angela Hill back in September of 2019. She was supposed to fight Mackenzie Dern about a year ago, but of course, the UFC was still in COVID hiatus at that point. But before the loss to Hill, she won on a massive winning streak here. Again, some competition a lot better than others, but win over Gloria DePaula, win over Ketlin Souza. So, Mr. Woods, let's break this down. What do you? Well, first of all, let me see what Tapology thinks. Tapology, 77% are going with Carnelazzi. Most of those, 72%, believe it'll be by decision. So that's the Tapology choice. Mr. Woods, break this down for us.
You know what? I actually think this might be the recipient of one of the first fights of the night because both of the streak, and even though Liang doesn't have as an astute body of work as her competitor on this particular night, I think it's fun because we have Zhang Wei Li in one of the title fights, one of the featured fights of the three title fight bout,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're seeing it, and I was kind of conscious about it with the anytime that Israel Adesanya fought, you'd see a lot of city kickboxing folks and stalwarts in the UFC on that particular card. And it might have happened during Anderson Silva and the Brazilians as well, or any other Brazilian champion. But we have a lot of Chinese or Mongolian contingents on this particular card. I think it's
Yep.
great because great MMA happens everywhere. And I think even though, like they're so similarly matched up, I think this might be a barn burner because not they're gonna start off the card one coming off of a loss. She's gonna and it was to Angela Hill. Look at what Angela Hill has done, right? Whether it be
Mm-hmm.
commentary or what, or actually fight acumen, right? And as she said on the Joe Rogan Experience during her time there, she was just like, "I'm still evolving," and that's amazing to see, right? But I know the Brazilian is just like, that's a stick in her craw, and she wants to get that out, right? And unfortunately, Liang will be the recipient of such things. But then again, I don't think when you've got Zhang Wei Li, right, and as a female, contemporary, I don't think you want to go home with a loss when you're going back, right? So,
Right.
man, it's tough to call. It is really tough to call, but I think their faces might not look the same way when they leave the cage than when they entered it.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a bit of a tough call here because you consider, like we just said, the level of competition. I mean, I guess that's got to be Carnelazzi by default because we mentioned Angela Hill, we mentioned Gloria DePaula. It's too bad that Mackenzie Dern fight couldn't happen because that would have been quite the grappling display. You're right though that this is definitely. I guess this can be more of a striker versus grappler. Your prototypical, back to the first days of MMA kind of fight with the two clash of styles. But like you said, I think both women have capabilities to be in this for a fight of the night potentially, a sleeper fight at the very least. Liang, I think, does have a pretty good future. She definitely could be a mainstay in this strawweight division. Uh, for now, I do see Carnelesi winning this fight, but I could see both of these women putting in a pretty great performance. I think this is going to be a good start to the night here.
Absolutely. And just, and not to be in opposition of you, I just think it could go either way. So I'm going to go with Liang because it could go either way. And it's funny because we've got two strawweights, and especially in the instance of Liang, that didn't come by way of Invicta, right? So
Right.
usually that was. The feeder system, obviously not on UFC Fight Pass anymore. So maybe that's the sign of the times, as Prince would say. But then again, the cool thing is there's a strawweight division everywhere in the world in any reputable promotion. So I love that.
Strawweight is one of the deepest divisions in MMA. And I'm not just talking about UFC, I'm talking about MMA across the board.
Hmm.
And now we go on to another fight. Like you mentioned, by the way, bunch of Asian talent, bunch of Chinese talents competing on this card. And one credit that you have to give the UFC when they have a champion from, say, a specific nation, like here with China with Weili Zhang, they know how to target and capitalize on that market. So we take a look now at Quilang Aori and Jeff Molina. This one's going to be an interesting matchup. So we look at the tail of the tape. Uh, Molina actually 4 years the junior of Aori. Molina actually will give up an inch in height to Aori, and their reaches are actually pretty much the same here. Tapology has Aori winning this fight, but not by a large margin. This is 60-40. This is one they're pretty split on. And decision either way is the favorite. So let's take a look first at El Jefe, Jeff Molina from the Kansas City, from the Missouri region. He struggled in his start of his MMA career, won just one of his first 3 fights, but he's going to enter on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fight win streak. Didn't have good competition to start off because you see like 0-1, 9-17, 3-7. 9-17 though, I mean that's a veteran. But a win over Kenny Porter and a win over Jacob Silva, the latter on the Contender Series should mention. Very good victory there. He was supposed to fight Zaruka Adashev in not UFC 257, but the Wednesday card before that. But Molina ended up testing positive for COVID-19, so that delayed his UFC debut. And Aori also going to be making his UFC debut, an 18-6 record. Again, another talent from the WLF Wars promotion over in China, and he has racked up a 6-fight win streak. So when I looked at the capabilities of these two, because I did a couple of the prospect pieces for MMA prospects, I shared some of my thoughts. Aori definitely has the striking capability. Because if you notice something that coming out of the WLF system, a lot of great strikers. I mean, Na Liang, decent striking here. Aori is a pretty good striker. The thing that concerns me is his grappling doesn't seem to be as great, which Molina is definitely somebody who capitalizes in the grappling department.
Yeah, 100%. But good Thomas. What is Aori's fight moniker?
Aori's fight moniker? Oh, the Mongolian Murderer.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is a badass nickname.
Yes. So that beats the boss anytime. If you love pro wrestling, I mean, Texas Rattlesnake, be it as it may, but he might as well have been the Texas Killer, like literally, right? So theoretically, I'm gonna go ahead with Aori, and yes, he might be lacking in terms of the grappling department, but you could say the same of Zhang Wei Li, right? And from what all intents and purposes, they've, her deal is not to even like beat or annihilate Rose Namajunas on this night. No. She wants to get better, just as a martial artist, just bit by bit by bit by bit. So I believe that Aori is going to inhabit some of those traits, right? So, and it's martial arts, right? Out of Asia. So that's it. I think he's, not to say that he's looking past Molina, but here's the deal. It's a killer versus your boss. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just watching some like weird Netflix documentary during quarantine, but I believe a killer is going to win over that. So I'm going with Aori, probably by decision.
I'm going to say Molina by decision, but you're right about the growth, because like this is a chance. Like Aori definitely has an opportunity to grow as a potential talent here in I believe this is a flyweight fight or a bantamweight fight. Actually, I think one of these guys is going to be moving up. I think it's actually no, it's Aori moving down. It's a flyweight fight. So this is definitely going to be a big learning opportunity for Aori, whether it is a win or a loss. You talk about weight class, you're talking about, a guy with, I'm not sure I should say a different style. This is mixed martial arts, but maybe a different pedigree and a different base and background. So definitely good chance for both of these guys, because this is another double debut. We got quite a few debuts here tonight on the prelims. So definitely a good chance for a lot of these people to be standing out. Speaking of another debut, at least one of these guys. I know Zhu Rong is supposed to be making his debut. Rodrigo Cazula Vargas. Actually, yeah, that's his third UFC bout. So let's take a look at these two here. So Rodrigo Vargas, He's still looking for his first win. He
Mm.
definitely picked up some big ground in Combate prior to the UFC, but lost to Alex De Silva back in August 2019. And then right before the pandemic in February 2020, UFC Rio Rancho, he ended up, he was dominating Brock Weaver in this fight, but
Mm.
then came the knee. This was one of two fights on that card with the weird illegal knees. The other one, of course, Diego Sanchez and Michel Pereira. So Rodrigo Vargas is actually on the road to a win over Brock Weaver, and dare I say a near finish of Brock Weaver,
Mm.
and about to get him out in that first round, and then throws the knee. And well, we have debates about knees all the time now, ever since Aljamain Sterling. So
Mm.
but let's take a look at Zhu Rong. Zhu Rong, by the way, the number one ranked lightweight fighter coming out of China, according to Tapology. So you know this guy is getting a big rub here. And he is coming in on a massive streak. I mean, you're talking about 10 wins. You're talking about 13 in the last 14. And I know I criticized the last two, some of the two of the last prospects for their level of competition, some of the last maybe three prospects that we were just going on. Another WLF Wars participant, but I mean, 18 and 5, 10 and 9, 17 and 5. Look at some of the names. He's faced Bedelia, Yilan Shah. I mean, there is a reason that Zurong has a lot of hype a bit coming into this UFC debut. I mean, I think this is a perfect opportunity for him. First of all, phenomenal with his striking.
Mm.
What I've seen, the little clips of him, I've seen great striking, grappling department. You know, we just talking about how Iori and Weili Zhang maybe not have the best grappling. Zhu Rong actually has impressed me with his grappling, and he is taking on a guy who is 0-2 in the UFC, so is fighting for his life. So this is a big chance. This is like that big, to throw our wrestling references there, the WWE debut where you have the jobber in the ring and you're making your debut, you get the big entrance. This is the chance for Zhu Rong to make a big entrance here in the UFC. And just to take a look at the tail of the tape here, so Zhu Rong actually is only 21 years old. He is 14 years the junior of Vargas. He will also have an inch in height, and the reaches are about the same. And Zhu Rong, of course, coming out of the Embo Fight Club, which I'd say has a bit of a history around it, for better or for worse. But Zhu Rong, I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of hype around this young man, and he is one of the stars, I think, on this preliminary card who can make a very big impact.
No, 100%. And nothing against Kazula Vargas because, again, he almost, it was en route to TKOing Brock Weaver, who
He was
literally looks like.
he was beating the tar out of him.
Yeah, I mean, literally, Brock Weaver, nothing against him, but he almost looked like one of those, like, the people that they were scared of in Game of Thrones, like the Night Talkers and what have you. He looks like a literal embodiment of it. But unfortunately, the inability to maintain his composure is what kind of costs Kazula Vargas in his what should have been his victory, right? And a performance of the night bonus at that, right? So he just doubly screwed himself. So I want to say, and looking at Zhu Rong across the other end of the octagon, right? If you're willing, I'm not much of a betting man, but I know there's people who, kind of parlay into that world. So if you're about to bet the house on Kazula Vargas beating Zhu Rong, well, you're exactly that, Zhu Rong.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're betting the house, what I would do is I would like to come over to your chips where you're placing them on the table, and move them over here.
Yeah, you might get a little bit of a sponsorship kickback, whether it be of some sort of anonymous organization or just I don't know, but I just say with that small fortune, you basically get a lot of tiny houses, and then maybe you have your own like fighting conglomerate. I don't know. But again, yeah, Zurong is, I mean, either he's going to finish Kazula Vargas because, again, in intense situation, Kazula Vargas, nothing against him, has shown his inability to maintain his composure. So I think Zurong is the complete opposite.
And if somehow things go wrong for Zurong, as I was just saying, he's only 21 years old. There is a lot of time for this young man to keep developing his game. Like we talk about how other fighters like Aori have time to develop their game. This guy has plenty of time. And dare I say, out of all the people who are going to be making their first appearance tonight, I think Zurong has the potential to be either the best performer or the second best performer. We'll get into my other candidate for the best potential UFC debutant in just a little bit. But yeah, I could see Zurong getting a finish in this one. Maybe in the first, maybe early in the second round. And so there's a lot of hype around Zurong. Zurong is definitely somebody to watch out for. One of my big fighters to watch out for tonight. We'll get into, again, my other one of the two in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about this battle that's going to be closing out the Fight Pass portion of the prelims. Danab Bakjarel and Kevin Natividad. This is going to be a bantamweight matchup. So let's take a look at Bakjarel. So Bakjarel is going to be making his third UFC appearance tonight. He dropped a decision to Haley Alatang on the card that Wei Li Zhang ended up winning the championship over in Shenzhen. But he rebounded on the other card where Wei Li fought in the championship fight, that war with Joanna, UFC 248, on the early portion of that, knocking out Guido Canetti with a very sweet left hook. And we take a look now at Natividad, a 9-2 record. He will be making his second UFC appearance. Of course, he was very big in the LFA promotion. Ended up winning 4 fights there, defeating Tyler Bielecki, Tom Nee, Andy Perez, Kyle Estrada. His UFC debut, he has a win in over Irwin Rivera in Combate as well. But he made his UFC debut in October. He ended up getting finished in the third round by another one of these up-and-comers in Miles Johns. So we got quite the interesting matchup with this one. Looking at the tail of the tape, Dana Batagirel is the slight favorite. Let's see. Batagirel has a 1-inch edge in height, but their reaches are just about the same. Most of Tapology is expecting Batagirel will win this one. Most of them expecting it will come by way of the big KO.
Yeah, I want to believe that this is Dana Batterell, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I just, I there might be a little bit of Dana White going like, "Oh, we have the same name, what have you? Just one extra syllable. Let's sign him." No, 100%. And Kevin Natividad, I actually came to know him kind of a weird way because I'm friends with Kyle the Hoosier Estrada, who Kevin Natividad beat at LFA, and on that card he fought as well as his brother, and they both scored wins. And Kevin essentially working his way into a UFC spot where I believe his younger brother is still in either an LFA, kind of figuring it
Yeah,
out,
still
right?
on the regional scene. Yep.
Absolutely. So everything is ripe, for Natividad to basically get finished. And my goodness, it pains me to see or say, because I'm part Fijian, he's Hawaiian. I want to go for the Islander just, on probable cause. But Navidad, Natividad didn't really show me too much in his UFC outing when he got there. So I don't. I think I don't want to say that there's a ceiling for him, but if there's something that's supposed to turn on, this is the fight that he needs to
He
turn it
needs to
on.
turn it on in this one. You're right, because it was a little bit of a disappointing outing. Now Miles Johns, of course, is a top prospect in this game. He's
Mm-hmm.
one to keep an eye on. But Natividad has the capability to do that. So he needs to turn it on against Badrell because we've seen him, like we just mentioned in his last fight with Guido. He showed some power and ended up knocking him out in just 3 minutes. Who says that Dana can't do that one again?
Exactly. And again, Natividad, it just seems like He reminds me a bit, him and his brother, a bit of Ray Cooper the third over in PFL,
PFL.
right? Yeah, absolutely. And I don't, but also the acumen and tenacity that Cooper Senior and the third have. I don't see it in Natividad, so I don't know. I hope I'm wrong, but again, everything is ripe for Dana to kind of KO Natividad. So that's what
I
I'm
can
going
see
with.
it. I agree. All right. So we move on now to the televised preliminary portion. Actually, both of them are televised. The ESPN2 is going to be airing. I forgot the Fight Pass prelims. So we flip over now to ESPN1. And to start off the ESPN1 prelims, my God, this is a start. We talked about, when stacked cards, like when certain fighters, you're like, oh, he could be headlining the prelims, or he could be on the fighting on the main card, and they're on the like kicking off the prelims. Like, you got a good card on your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a matchup I'm very much looking forward to. Potentially one of my picks for another sleeper fight, a night pick. So Pat Sabatini, I was mentioning, like, Zhu Rong was one of my big UFC debutants who can make a big impact on their first night in the promotion. The same also goes for Pat Sabatini. Finally, we get to see this man in the octagon. Pat Sabatini has, one of the biggest prospects, not just one of the biggest featherweight prospects across America. I just say one of the top prospects of MMA, who is finally going to be making his octagon debut. 5'8", 70-inch reach, one of the best to come out of the Northeast here. Ended up actually a former two-time CFFC featherweight champion. He ended up winning the belt back against Jesse Stern. And let's face it, he probably could have had a one singular reign, maybe even gone to the UFC sooner, maybe on a 6-fight win streak. You never know. But James Gonzalez, of course, those of you who follow on the regional scene or follow these gruesome MMA accounts well know that Sabatini, just a sickening arm injury in the first round of that fight. That poor man had such a setback, but now he's rebounded with 2 straight. He looks as fire as he did before. This is the time for Pat Sabatini, and what a way to debut with the UFC. Of course, he was supposed to debut in February, but Rafael Alves missed weight, and it was just such a bad miss that the commission was like, no. So Sabatini now gets a long-awaited debut against Canada's Tristan Connolly. So Tristan Connolly, 35 years old. Those of you may remember Tristan Connolly as the man who fought Michelle Pariah. It was that big hype around Michelle Pariah, and Michelle Pariah came out of the gate at UFC Vancouver in late 2019, doing those flips, doing all of those kicks, and gassing himself out. Tristan Connolly takes a decision, one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. What you may not know is, unfortunately, he has just had some major setbacks, injuries, was involved in a devastating car accident that he just, had to come back from that, let alone to life. That then again, from fighting to be able to fight. But this man proved he is a fighter, great recovery, and he actually was supposed to fight in April. But that event was canceled due to the coronavirus, of course, because the UFC was on break. I believe Tristan Connolly got ill during his time away from the octagon, in addition to his injuries. But here he is. It's going to be great to see him back. And my God, what a fire way to kick off the televised prelims. Pat Sabatini, by the way, 5 years the younger of Connolly, and 2-inch height advantage for Connolly. So Connolly's actually going to have the physical edges in this one. So, Mr. Woods, I mean, this is a great matchup on this prelim card.
No, it is. And, obviously you were mentioning that Pat Sabatini, had this gruesome injury at CFFC. I mean, again, we're coming off of a few CFFCs ago at none other than the ECW Arena, or the now 2300 Arena in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with none other than CM Punk. CM Punk, right?
Oh, the detached finger. Oh,
yes,
God.
yeah, absolutely, right? So can we just regress in knowing that CFFC is the place where weird ish happens. That's just where what happens. I don't know
Thank
if it,
I'll just say thank God for John Morgan and CM Punk on commentary.
yeah. Oh gosh, and I mean, CM Punk basically calling shenanigans on the gentleman who's like, I didn't know that I had my finger in his glove. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. You must. You need to get checked, sir, because you have a vision problem. You got a memory deal. But again, Sabatini, I'm picking him to win because here's the deal. Like you said, right? Tristan Connolly, he had somebody who was a highly touted prospect, right? And basically did a lot of the work for him, right? In gassing himself on the way to the octagon, right? In his debut. And still couldn't finish him. That's just like the guy who was trying to take down Sean O'Malley when Sean O'Malley's foot was broke. You
Oh,
know?
Andre Sukumtav.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, no, it's there for you. It's right for the picking. When you're like, whatever deity that you subscribe to, and you go like, oh, I'm waiting for a sign. That's a damn sign. You didn't take it. So I'm not taking you, Tristan Connolly, because you couldn't even finish somebody who literally gave you like everything that you needed to pull off a stellar submission with all of the hype surrounding it, and you failed. So Sabatini will make sure that any mistake that you make against him, pardon the pun, but much like Triple H, he is a cerebral assassin, and he has every. I mean, even though you might be bigger, Connolly, it doesn't matter. It does not matter.
I
So
mean, I feel great for Connolly in that he's coming back, just from the injuries alone, and is finally stepping into a cage again. But Sabatini, he's one of the, this is a guy who I think could be a top 10 talent in the featherweight division.
no, I agree. I agree. It's God, I forgot the guy, but I remember Sanhagen, right? When Brendan Schaub, for all of the crazy ish that Schaub says, and he says a lot of crazy ish, right? But he was saying the first time I heard Corey Sanhagen's name was on either Big Brown Bakedown or Fighter and the Kid or one of them, right? And
Mhm.
look what happened to Sanhagen, right? So I this Sabatini reminds me a lot of Sanhagen, where he's just this. It's something really like maybe an asteroid hitting the Vistar Arena, right before this fight, or what have you, would be the only reason Sabatini doesn't make it, out of the octagon with a win and a finish one at that. I say KO third round.
I
That's it.
I will do. I'll do one better. I say KO or TKO in the second round.
Ah,
I think we are going to, like I mentioned, I think Zhu Rong could have been my top choice here for UFC debutant who's going to make the biggest statement, maybe even a bonus, if it wasn't for the fact that Sabatini was finally making his UFC debut, and I'm all hyped for Sabatini. I think he is going to be one of the biggest stars of this evening, and like I mentioned, he is going to be a name to watch out in the featherweight division. I can't wait.
absolutely. Now, don't go gas yourself out like Tristan Connolly's opponent and what have you, because we got more show for you, folks.
We move on now to another name that has been in the UFC for a little while now and is still one of the biggest names, up and comers in the middleweight division, and Brendan All In Allen. And he'll be taking on Carl Roberson. And Allen, of course, the favorite in this one. Allen, actually, a lot of people. Oh, okay, that's massive. That's 89% picking him to win, and most of those, of course, going by submission. Allen, pretty much a grappling expert here, only 25 years old. Um, let's see. He ended up, of course, defeating Aaron Jeffrey on the Contender Series of a first round submission. Aaron Jeffrey just won a CFC title and is about to come back into the Contender Series later this fall. That's being reported. Of course, the submission of Kevin Holland. TKO Tom Breeze, decision over Kyle Dawkins. That was the fight where he and Ian Heinisch was supposed to fight. I hope one day we can make Ian Heinisch and Brendan Allen again, because there is a lot of hype between those two. But he's going to need a rebound coming off a second round TKO to Sean Strickland. And again, taking on Carl Roberson, which I think this is definitely an opportunity for a rebound. Roberson, 30 years old, taking on, let's see. Well, of course, he had his UFC. He was a fifth. He actually ended up competing on the very first season of the Contender Series. Knocked Ryan Spann out in about 15 seconds. Was a highlight. Ended up going 2-2 in his next fights. He submitted Darren Stewart, defeated Jack Marshman. He lost to Cesar Ferreira. And he lost to Glover Teixeira, but the Teixeira one, I remember, that was in Brooklyn. That was the first plus card. That was a little bit of a late notice fight. He stepped up to face Teixeira when a bout fell through. So you can't put too much stock into that one. Wellington Turman won by split decision. Got the third round submission of Roman Kopylov. But I remember most of all, because I interviewed these two guys when they were supposed to fight, fight with Marvin Vittori and all the bad blood that happened there, from the weight miss to Roberson pulling out of that fight the day of in May, and then they ended up fighting a month later, and Vittori submits him. So after missing weight debacle that caused the fight to be canceled in Jacksonville, and then the first round submission loss to Vittori, this is going to be a rebound fight for Roberson. This is actually a rebound fight for both individuals, but who needs it more, and who's going to have the opportunity here to, capitalize and get that win. And I can't help but think that it's going to be all in Allen in this one, possibly getting a submission victory, like Tapology is saying.
Okay. I no amazing points, and I could see you going that way, but I am going with Baby K, Carl Roberson. And you know why? Right? For all of the submission acumen that Brendan Allen has, and it is absolutely true, right? But that fight to Sean Strickland, right? That was a KO, right? Which Roberson has been known to do, right? A few in his day, right? And then also
go ask Ryan Spann.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing about it is that loss to Strickland wasn't his last loss on any type of match, because a fight to win, he was submitted. Just saying. So, I yes, of course. To me, in terms of combat sports, Allen Allen is 0-2 of his last two fights, right? And again, this
true.
is so. I think he's going to go into for some sort of sleek submission. He's in his mind. He's Ryan Hall, right? And he's going to open himself to the Hall of Pain. And that isn't Mark Henry. No. That is Carl Roberson. He's going to waylay him. I don't know. It could be a knee, could be whatever, or even catch him in a sleek, submission himself, because all the things and all of the submission acumen that Allen has, well, a little glimmer of it goes by way of Roberson. It's not like he doesn't have submission wins in his arsenal. So that's why I'm going with Roberson. That's probably going to be, I want to say, in my mind, it's almost like that Cody Garbrandt, like that buzzer beater, bang, and then like the very the third round, gonna bink him and whatever. And sometimes they might even make the bell. Like he might be follow through for his punch. The horn sounds and he knocks him out and it won't count. But something weird like that. I feel that.
So let me ask you: do you think people are underrating Robertson, or do you think people are overrating Allen, or do you think Allen's maybe a little too in his own head, or?
Yeah, you could be, right? And again, you were saying, Roberson, right? The loss to Vittori. Oh, man, nothing ever happened to Vittori. It's not like he just got announced this week for a UFC title shot. No, that didn't happen, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I'll take a loss to a guy who is contending for the title any damn day and twice on Sundays. So that's why I'm going with Baby K.
Moving on now, we see Dwight Grant is going to be taking on Stefan Sekulik. So we take a look now at the tail of the tape on this one. So moderate favorite is Dwight Grant, the body snatcher. And 88%, another one of those Tapology things. A lot of people expecting a win for him, and a lot of people are expecting a big KO. So we look at Dwight Grant, who actually fought back in August, the loss to Daniel Rodriguez. He was actually supposed to fight in December against Li Jingliang. unfortunately, that fight ended up falling through. Of course, Dwight Grant split decision win over Alan Juban, a last second win. You're talking about a buzzer beater against Carlo Pedersoli. Lost to Zakatow. Of course, Dwight Grant was a Contender Series alum himself, getting the win over Tyler Hill back in season 2. So now we take a look now at the 12-3 Stefan Sekulik. Sekulik actually is making a second UFC appearance, coming off a loss to Ramazan Amiev back in September of 2018. So it's been 2.5 years since he's had a MMA fight. Before that, he was a big competitor in the Serbian Battle Championship, actually claimed their middleweight championship with a win over Javago Francisco. Level of competition, I'm seeing a couple of good wins, but I'm also seeing a couple of he hasn't fought in about 2.5 years. I mean, I guess you can say this is a setup rebound fight for the body snatcher here.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, Stefan is a Serbian. When have you never known them to like lose fights? Like any Eastern European bloc country and whatever, I am scared crapless. Like I mean, much like Chris Farley in Black Sheep, there, chocolate pudding mysteriously enters my pants. I don't know how it happens, but the body snatcher, holy smoke! If there's anybody to beat a Serbian and finish one on this night, man, you gotta believe. This one, I think Tapology in the dais there got it completely right. But it's not going to be easy because Serbians, it's in their blood just to be just like amazing athletes and just like never say die, right? They use that on being the elite if you watch that sort of thing, right? And it's a never say die kind of interlude, right, by Papa Buck. Well, that is Serbian and that whole Kazakhstan, Russia, all of that. Like, I'm just scared crapless. But I mean, if I've got a body snatcher as my bodyguard, he might be the one to take into Serbia and take him down. So I'm going to get Dwight Grant.
I also am going with Dwight Grant early finish. I'm just a little concerned about Sekulik, considering that it's been 2.5 years, and you're getting thrown in there with a prospect like Dwight Grant right away. That's a tough one. That's a bit of a tough. Dana White dealt him a bit of a tough one in this regard.
Absolutely, but then let's say we're all wrong, and Sekulik, for some reason, guts out a split decision win,
or then his stock goes from here to right up here.
Right, we've seen this happen, a litany of times. I remember, Sean O'Malley, going into that fight with my friend Terry and Flash Ware, and it was kind of even. It wasn't, I mean, one would even say that Ware would have won. I did a video on one of my pages saying exactly the same thing, and look at where Sean O'Malley is now. So this could be an amazing. I mean, it's an amazing opportunity for both gentlemen, but I think taking about. I mean, the ultimate opportunist, if you will, that will be Dwight Grant on this night, not Edge.
I like that reference. That's a good one there. We move on now to the featured prelim of the night. Alex, the Cowboy Oliveira, taking on Randy Brown. So we take a look at the tail of the tape on this one. Both of these welterweight gentlemen. So height edge is actually going to go to Oliveira by 4 inches. Only an inch, however, Randy Brown is going to have the 4-inch height advantage. Pardon me, I had the two of them mixed up, and Randy Brown is actually going to have all the physical edges in this one. And a lot of people in Tapology are expecting that Randy Brown is going to pull something off. So Randy Brown, he made his UFC debut quite a while ago, a former Ring of Combat champ, ended up going into the UFC about 5 years ago. Actually, it was the one to hand Mickey Gall his first UFC loss in Madison Square Garden. Then he ended up facing Nico Price. Ended up getting finished. It was weird. It was Nico Price, the hammer fist from the bottom. Nico Price, of course, just weird with his knockouts. He's rebounded with the win over Brian Barberena, so that's a good win. Warley Alves, a good win. Finished, however, Vicente Luque last August. So, Randy Brown's the guy who either finishes or he gets finished. So this is a rebound opportunity for him. Alex Cowboy Oliveira. I mean, once upon a time, this guy was one of the best up and comers in the welterweight division. He was got somebody to have your eye on. But over the last couple of years, it's been a struggle. The loss to Gunnar Nelson, the loss to Mike Perry, to Nick Dalby. Shivat, his last fight, he ended up getting submitted by Shavkat Rakhmonov. Even the Max Griffin win, that was only a split decision. And then, yeah, of course, have all the stuff outside the cage, like a couple of years ago with the whole domestic abuse, child, ugly, ugly situation here. So, I mean, you're talking about, Randy Brown. This is a great opportunity for him. Both of these guys are going to be looking for a rebound here, but man, it's just, as somebody who has followed the UFC for a while, it's just a bit sad to see, once upon a time, Alex Oliveira. Remember, Cowboy versus Cowboy was a big main
Yeah.
event of like mid 2010s, and since then it's been a rough road for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one where it's just why? Why are we getting this? It may be a fantastic fight, but like we're gonna see in Anthony Smith, right? Got, I almost laughed, like on the floor because Chris Weidman in one of the embedded said, "Oh, we brought Anthony Smith in for this camp to get a good look," and I was just like, "Oh, that look is gonna be the turtle position." Because that's what's gonna happen. Oh, good lord! A precursor of what's to come. Now, again, it's these are evenly matched in their career, right? Randy Brown, which if that doesn't sound like you just threw your name into a UFC name generator, I don't know what does, right?
Right.
And the reason why I'm trashing him because again, the outside stuff. I'm not with, right? But then on the other side of the docket, Alex Oliveira, like you said, highly touted prospect, and neither one of these men at the end of the night after their performance, either way, I don't think you're going to be like, oh, I want to see them against Usman because that's uh, top of the
Yeah,
card.
no.
Top of the card. That's who. Best case scenario, somebody drops out in Usman's next fight, assuming that he beats Masvidal. Like somebody drops out, and you get the call. Your manager gets the call, Randy Brown or Alex Oliveira. Are you the person? I don't know. I don't.
Probably not. I think these two guys, if you want me to be honest, these two guys have ceilings on them, and they pretty much are at their ceilings or near them.
Yeah, so why fight? Is it the money thing? Do they need a financial advisor? Do they? Because there's no reason why we need to see this fight here. Now, hopefully, the fight fan in me, I hope I'm wrong, but this
Right.
might be like these the go like
This
get
is
popcorn.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is another fight where we're talking. I just mentioned in the for the main card. I'm excited more for the two women's title fights over the welterweight one. Here, like for the prelims, I'm more excited for Sabatini Connolly. I'm more excited for Robertson Allen. I'm more, hyped for Vargas and Wrong. I this one, I'm not as hyped for. Like I get the name brand is probably wide. These two are at the top of the card, but there's other prelim fights that I'm more excited about than this one.
Yeah, so like I said, I don't know how to feel about it. I know both men are going to, probably lose more than their fair share of brain cells, right? And again, with Randy Brown's kind of outside of the octagon antics, one would argue, hey, maybe it's a mental illness. Well, you're going to say more of that, unfortunately, after this night is over for both gentlemen. So I really feel bad about this one. I just doesn't make me feel good as a fan.
This isn't the one. This isn't the fight that I want getting into the main card. I would have rather, a Sabatini, a big victory from a guy who is going to be possibly an up and comer, or a current prospect like Allen, or a guy who's going to be a big one to watch for, like Pat Sabatini or Zurong. I remember, I think it was the Fight Island card when Usman and Masvidal first met. You know who was the featured prelim who got the big win in their UFC debut? One of the guys who's fighting next week, Jiri Prozaka.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was
headline match next week for Fight Night when they return back to UFC Apex. Which, so again, I really don't feel good about this one. I would even have placed this as the start. Now it's crazy to say because when we're talking about tenure, John Jones talked about it. It's on the Wild Ride podcast with Steve-O and everything. Yes, they do have some name value in both of these guys. I would say more Oliveira because
Oliveira, yeah.
yeah, more casuals, filthy casuals will probably confuse him with Charles Du Bronx,
Drew
right? Like,
Bronson.
right. So I would have even placed
Or
the
or
women's.
Cerrone, considered cowboy nickname.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would have rather, if I'm the booker, I would actually place the first prelim, right? That match against the Brazilian and the Chinese, Lang
Now
and
Yang and Carnelossi.
I would have put that in this spot
Mm.
realistically because I think you're going to see more action, and again, you'll feel a lot better about yourself than you would after the aftermath of this. And somebody's probably, I even see it, like somebody's going to cry a foul, like some judge didn't do this or the referee didn't take a point here. There's going to be a lot of nut shots. I feel like there's going to be nut shots and eye pokes, which isn't the usual fare for these two. But again, I think just
With how MMA has been going, though, with how MMA events have been going, you need a nut shot and an eye poke counter.
yeah, yeah, and again, they might have uttered the to me, I think is the death knell to an aging fighter. Right? Is I've felt the best I've ever felt. I'm sure you could probably, if anyone scour the interwebs, if you will, indulge me, but I'm sure you could have, if any statement was made by either two of these gentlemen, I think that is it. And everybody, you can go back, send me DMs if you want to check me. But everyone that goes, hey, I felt the best that I've ever been. Yep. Bye bye.
I was gonna say I'm like trying to check that right now. I'm trying to see if Alex Oliveira or Randy Brown have said something. I don't see something for. I don't see either for either man, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of them said something like that.
Which is even more stark, right? Like of all of the stat card, and they're on the a featured. They're a featured prelim, right? That there's no buzz. People forgot. Nobody, not you, not me, not any other podcaster in the litany of podcasts that have either established themselves or popped up during the pandemic. Nobody went to either of these two and like, I want you. It tells you everything you need to know about this fight.
So let's get into the good stuff. Let's get into this main card. So we start things off with a former title challenger. Again, a former title challenger, coming off a victory is going to be opening up from the main card. Like this is how stacked this card is. It's Anthony Lionheart Smith, Return of the Mac, although he didn't come out to Return of the Mac in his last fight, which caused a little bit of an uproar in the MMA community. Taking on, we talk about up-and-comers here, Jimmy Crute. So Jimmy Crute is 25 now. They were just talking about this on ESPN during the weigh-ins, so he's not eligible for this list. But before he turned 25, Jimmy Crute was named the top prospect under 25 that the UFC has to offer. So we take a look at this matchup. Anthony Smith, of course, he's going to be in his 41st fight. He's only 32 years old, and he's already been in over 40 fights in his MMA career. Of course, he was a journeyman middleweight. Then he made the move up to light heavyweight a few years back, knocked off Rashawn Evans and retired him, Mauricio Shogunua, Volkan Oezdemir. He had the title fight with John Jones, which he took an illegal knee, but ended up fighting through it in a unanimous decision loss. He submitted Alexander Gustafsson, and he ended up getting beaten pretty bad by Glover Teixeira almost exactly a year ago. Lost to Rakic in a 3-round short notice main event, and then had another 3-round short notice main event with Devin Clark, but ended up getting the job done with a submission in the first round. So there's your take on Anthony Smith. So, by the way, if one of the title fights falls through at the last minute again, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. Expect Anthony Smith to fill that role because that's the role that this man has been filling in as of late. But Jimmy Crute, 12-1. He is one of the best fighters to be coming out of Australia, and ended up. Let's take a look. He had the first round submission of Chris Bircher on the Contender Series. Submitted Paul Craig. Who submits Paul Craig?
Apparently he
Nobody.
did.
Apparently, Sam Alvey he finished fairly quickly. Misha Surkanov he ended up getting submitted by. So that's another submission specialist though. But ended up submitting Mikhail Oleksichuk and ended up TKOing Modestus Bukauskas. I think he's the guy we made fun of his last name in the
I didn't
260
make fun
stream.
of it. I just thought Modelo Bukaki. That's what I got. Which is now Steve Austin Beer Bash for anybody keeping, up. So, and Modelo is the sponsor of the UFC, the official beer. So, shout out if you want the sponsored podcast. Hey, guess what? Empty the Bench is here. According to the Woods is here. We got your back in our
Definitely.
Modelo Bukaki. But
I was going to mention also, Crute was supposed to fight Johnny Walker in last month at the UFC 260, but Walker had a little bit of a problem in that he tore his whole pectoral muscle. So yeah, that fight didn't happen. But hey, you know what? I think this is a bigger opportunity for him for Jimmy Crute here.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of that, New Zealand, Australian kind of contingent, either kickboxing or, where Robert Whitaker, plies his trade. I mean, it's an amazing deal that, again, great, you used to look at places like Southern California or New Mexico or, Black Zillions when they were a team in South Florida, right? Great MMA is happening everywhere in every division. I couldn't be more thrilled. Now, what I won't be thrilled with, and the people probably not going to be thrilled, is probably Anthony Lionheart Smith's wife and children. Because I mean, he much like the Mormons, the Duggars. He's got a bunch of them. He's got a bunch of the kids. I also have a bunch of kids, so I'm not mad at that. But the face that he is going to have and the lack of brain cells. I don't know. This maybe somebody might want to look into it, but obviously Anthony Smith is an amazing, commentator, right? But we're in a day where even Jimmy Smith of Bellator fame, right, is not in any name promotion outside of like WWE, and he, by Joe Rogan's estimation, is the best analyst, right? And then when you get into that fighter, what have you, well, maybe is there an asterisk? Well, maybe you're not on one of the panel shows, or you don't get called back as much if you're not a former champion, and that is the reason, the impetus why Anthony Smith fights, and Paul Felder took that, short notice fight and whatever.
And the thing is with Anthony Smith, it's like, does he have the capabilities to get back to another title shot? Should he have taken the knee, in the disqualification win? I mean, when you're talking about, what just happened with Aljamain Sterling not too long ago. But, Anthony Smith, I mean, he's got a hell of a heart, first of all, is in his name, the Lionheart. Hell of a grappling ability. The amount of comebacks that he's did, look at the comeback submission against Oezdemir, the comeback submission against Gustafsson. But Jimmy Crute, I mean, yeah, you're talking about a guy who's 40 years old, as coming off a couple of bad, fairly bad losses. And he's taken on Jimmy Crute, who's 25, has a lot of hype around him. He has one submission loss in the UFC, and that was to a guy who's a submission specialist like he is. And, Crute, like we just mentioned, Sam Alvey, he's beaten. So there's a name already. Our friend Modelo Bukaki, as we call him. And again, he submitted Paul Craig. Paul Craig, one of the best submission guys in this game, and he submitted him. Yep. You don't think maybe I'm going to pick the young blood in this one and pick Jimmy Crute will possibly submit Anthony Smith? And it's a tough task to finish a guy like Anthony Smith.
Yeah, but here's the gimmick. Like, both of their gimmicks, Lionheart versus the Brute, right? And I love Jimmy Crute for getting that layup, right? The layup that apparently Ray Borg, nothing against Ray Borg, a fantastic human being, loved his kids who are battling, ailments, right? But, I mean, Ray Borg, layup, Cyborg, something Borg, right? Something
Right.
animatronic or whatever. And Taz Mexican Devil, it's what we got. It is the Alan Belcher, Johnny Cash, bad tattoo that looked like Prune Face from Dick Tracy of bad nicknames, right? So with Jimmy Crute, he took that layup. Took that sign from his deity, and like, I need a sign. He became the Brute with his last name Crute. Now, how many brutes throughout the course of history have eaten hearts of their opponents?
Mm.
Countless, right? There are civilizations today that are essentially built upon that very instance. This time is no different. Jimmy Crute is going to annihilate Anthony Smith again, where his coaches will have to sit down with Anthony Smith, his wife, his children have to sit down and say, no more. Almost a la Mick Foley falling off the Hell in the Cell cage
Oh
back
God,
in
yeah.
the day, right? And you
Or Mick Foley
remember,
in the I Quit match with The Rock.
yeah, the I Quit match, right? Or, Mark Coleman, his daughter's crying in his
Oh,
arms, right?
oh
Exactly.
yeah.
I hope Anthony Smith has that type of support system that Mick Foley had, that Mark Coleman had, because and still have, right? Because you're going to need it. Because again, either you're going to be annihilated beyond recognition. That's best case scenario. Other best case scenario, you get KO'd or put to sleep. And you're not going to tap if you get put in a submission by Jimmy Crute. I know you're not. You're the Lionheart. It's in your name. It's your being. But there is no way. No way. I mean, something weird, or maybe an illegal knee, or what have you happens where Jimmy Crute doesn't take the win in this one.
Yeah, yeah, just this is Jimmy Crute's fight. I'm a little surprised maybe Anthony Smith isn't considering retirement yet, but he is still a ranked fighter, to be fair. He is still one of the top 10 in the UFC, but with a loss here to Jimmy Crute, I think we're going to see a flip. I think he's going to fall out, and Jimmy Crute is going to find his way in the middle of that top 10.
He's going to be
And
Dogecoin.
he's going to surge. And speaking of talents, former talents who are looking to work their way back up into the rankings. So we have Uriah Hall, who was once a big middleweight contender. He's starting to try to work his way back up, taking on Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman, a fellow Hofstra alum, fellow New Yorker, former UFC middleweight champion, the owner of one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. But again, these are two individuals who, once upon a time they were great, and now they need to work their ways back up. Although, admittedly, Hall is doing a lot better in that department than Chris Weidman is. We look at the Tapology predictions. Okay, that's brutal. 65% say it's Hall, but 85% of those are saying he is going to knock Chris Weidman out. So we look at Chris Weidman. You know what? It's very funny. He ended up beating Anderson Silva and ruining his streak, and Anderson Silva hasn't been the same since. Ever since Chris Weidman has lost the title to Luke Rockhold, he has not been the same since. I mean, we had the controversial TKO against Gegard Mousasi with the whole. That's another one of those situations with like the knee, with the disqualification or TKO, or the instant replay and all that. But other than that, I mean, he submitted Calvin Gastelum. Yoel Romero and Jacare Souza both played out similarly in that Weidman ended up winning the first two rounds in my book, or in the worst case scenario 1-1, even going into the third. And then Weidman both times suffered a brutal, devastating knockout right as he was winning the fight. And then Dominic Reyes, his one fight attempt at light heavyweight. Well, there was a reason it was only one fight attempt, because Reyes battered him, obliterated him in less than 2 minutes. And then he went back to middleweight, got a much needed win over Omari Akhmedov, which I'm surprised Weidman won. Not that I didn't pick him. Before that fight, I picked Akhmedov, and Weidman did win the fight. I will admit it, but it was also one of the most boring fights I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
So now we look at Uriah Hall, 16-9. We talk about how he suffered some pretty devastating losses. I mean, losses, though, to Whitaker, to Mousasi, Brunson, and Paulo Costa. Those are not bad losses. And,
Nope.
the same thing can be said about Weidman's losses. I mean, Romero, Souza, also lost to Misasi. Those are also not bad losses. But it's just, yeah, Uriah Hall also is coming off, let's see, he's finished Christoph Jaco, finished Bevon Lewis, split decision over Antonio Carlos Jr., who just left the UFC for PFL, and
Mhm.
Anderson Silva. But again, this is 2020 Anderson Silva, not 2013 or 2010 Anderson Silva. Um, you're talking about two guys who don't have bad losses, losses to some top talent. And once upon a time, they were top talent themselves. But these days, these guys are not top talent.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it's funny. Uh, Uriah Hall. Man, jeez, he knocked people dead dick in the dirt. That's what Uriah Hall did. I mean, like he was almost like looking into Medusa's eyes and turning into stone. That I would
I
actually
remember.
prefer
I
that.
remember. Sorry.
No,
I remember when Uriah Hall beat Chris Leben. I remember being so impressed with him at that point.
mm, Oh, on the Ultimate Fighter again. I would have rather been turned into stone by Medusa than be the recipient of one of those weird kicks that Uriah Hall did and
The
just
greatest knockout in tough history.
yep, no, 100%. So I want a conjuring to happen. Uriah Hall is of Jamaican descent, where some much like Fiji, black magic does happen, right? I want him to conjure himself back to that Uriah Hall in the Ultimate Fighter house. And I don't want any remorse because he almost reminds me of Roxanne Modafferi, right? Where they're absolute like volatile, like their skill set is so just off the charts, it's not even funny, but they have empathy. They have empathy, and sometimes that empathy for their opponent of the night gets the better of them, and their empathy, not so much the opponent, their empathy and respect defeats them on any given night, right? So, and would it be really cool, right? If not only does Uriah Hall have Anderson Silva on his trophy wall in terms of win, well, the person who beat Anderson Silva, a former champion, right? To you know, have that also. The one you have a win over Silva himself, as well as the one who beat Silva. I mean, again, we're not clamoring for Uriah Hall to get another title shot anytime soon, and it's even scarier division than the last time that we were thinking about Uriah Hall as a major contender, some
Right.
10 years
And
ago.
you could say the same thing for Chris Weidman. It's a much different division. As much as Weidman says, that he can beat Israel Adesanya, that he's figured it out, you have to get to the title shot in the upper echelon first. And even that's a tough road with Whitaker and Vettori and Costa.
Yeah,
That's a very tough task to handle.
it's not good for Weidman. And again, I will reference it once more, but it was told on the UFC Embedded series, I want to say episode 3 or 4, when Weidman actually, like, we don't even see Weidman until like episode 4, when he used to be a focal point of the countdowns and the embeddeds. We don't see him until at least episode 4, right? And he's
Hmm.
just like, oh, I don't have my coach whatever, because I forgot the reasoning, but we got Anthony Smith in here to get a different look. And I'm just like, oh no, you guys are both going to be in fetal position or turtle position at the end of the night. I don't know, maybe because you're more familiar because you're from that neck of the woods. Is Papa Weidman still alive? Is he still with us?
I believe so. I believe
Okay,
so.
so we're gonna need
And Chris
Papa Weidman.
Weidman, yes, and yes, Chris Weidman is still his boy.
Yes, absolutely. And those same words are going to be uttered when yeah, that's my boy is going to be uttered, but a more demure tone because he will be at the corner going, "That's my boy."
Oh, one more little piece of trivia here that has to be brought up, and ESPN brought this up. I'll say that little two here. That's not a fluke. This is actually a rematch from 10 years ago.
Oh, good
Wyman
lord.
and Hall were once top prospects in the middleweight division, down in the Ring of Combat promotion. Was it
Oh,
Was it Ring of Combat or was it Ring of Fire?
I, we
I'll
were
have to double
talking.
check on that one.
We were talking about the
Ring of Combat,
WWE.
yes.
Okay, I want it to be Ring of Fire because Johnny Cash over Jerry Lee Lewis and Great Balls of
Balls
Fire.
of Fire.
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know, man.
uh,
This is underwhelming, in terms of prospects, and to call your a 38-year-old Uriah Hall a prospect in 2020,
that's not right.
yeah. So we're like, that's it.
I think I agree. I think Hall is going to get the win. I think this is going to be another one of those cases for Weidman. As much as I love Weidman, and he has won rounds in those losses, but it's like he'll win a round, maybe two, but then late in that second round or in that third round, Hall is just gonna land a devastating shot, rock him, and just finish him. Because Weidman has a problem, finishing fights, and I mean, in that last fight, he ended up going to distance and getting the victory, but it was also in one of the most boring fashion possible. So
Yeah,
Weidman is my New York boy, but his
well,
time at this game is up. I got to go with Hall in this one.
yeah, and Uriah Hall grew up in I believe Brooklyn too. So they're
Oh yeah, New
both,
York City. Oh yeah, look at that right here,
yeah,
Long Island
absolutely.
and in the city.
Absolutely. But here's the deal. I want to read on Twitter from MMA Prospect or Fansided MMA a article by this man right here above me that says both men, Chris Weidman and Uriah Hall, have both retired. Because what's left? What's left? Paydays? Lack of brain cells? Weidman is a father and a husband, right? Like, why is he? He's no closer to another title shot. Maybe the CTE has fully engulfed his brain where he believes he is, but no, it's not. It's not there. And Uriah Hall again, he's no longer a prospect. He's no longer like,
Was
name one good Chris Weidman fight. I'll wait. I'll wait.
Other than the Silva fights?
Were they great though?
I thought they were okay. Well, the first one
Anderson
was okay. The first one
Anderson
was okay. The second one, well, I mean, the leg injury happened. That kind of ruined it.
Right, you remember a freak accident more than the person who actually won the title. And for me, Chris Weidman basically wrote the book that now essentially Alexander Volkanovski is doing. You beat the goat in a particular division like by fluke twice, but you're like, no, I don't need to revisit that, right? So
Well,
again,
I was gonna say, I mean, credit where credit's due, in that Weidman did beat Vitor Belfort, and I believe who else did he beat? Was it Rua? Was it Shogun he beat? I think it was.
yeah,
I was just, my point was going to be, but the thing about the Belfort win is that remember, that was post TRT Vitor.
yes,
That was after
exactly.
they banned TRT. So Vitor ended up losing a lot of his steam that he had picked back up.
The only time that a win over Vitor Belfort matters is essentially in Japan. You're swapping out Bruce Buffer for Leon Hart, and that's it. And like, all steroids all the time. Like, give me all the TRT, me all the supplements. That Vitor. If you can beat that Vitor, then you could say something. You didn't beat that Vitor. So bye, Chris Weidman. Bye, Uriah Hall. Even when you win, bye.
All right, let's get to the fights. Let's get to the fights. First of all, the second most hyped fight I'm hyped for. The women's flyweight title fight. The first of our three title bouts. Valentina Shevchenko, Jessica Andrade. And most people are expecting Shevchenko to win. That's a lot. That's a big discrepancy. I thought it'd be a lot closer than this one. And I think even the odds agree that it's going to be a lot closer, that this is going to be Shevchenko's toughest challenge since Nunes. And yeah, you're talking about Andrade looking to make history. Speaking of Nunes, Andrade looking to become the second female fighter in UFC history to win championships in two different weight classes. Valentina Shevchenko, of course, ended up winning the flyweight title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. The title was then vacant at the time because of Nico Montano. So Shevchenko won the title, knocked out Jessica Ai brutally, defeated Liz Carmouche, defeated Caitlin Chukagian, defeated Jennifer Maia in November. She's looking for her fifth title defense. Andrade Of course, she ended up winning the title with the slam knockout of Rose Namajunas. That was the strawweight title, of course. Ended up losing the title in 42 seconds to Weili Zhang in China. Uh, Ended up losing a rematch to Namajunas back in Fight Islands, but rebounded and moved up the flyweight and knocked out Caitlin Chuchagian in her flyweight debut. So, quite an interesting scenario here in that Shevchenko has a big physical edge, but of course Andrade got that power, and Andrade can get inside. She's got the grappling, so this is going to be a fun fight here.
Yeah, it will be. But here, I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, look at the last time that UFC in like this kind of post or in during pandemic world that they promoted a three title fight on the same night. We basically got a title change of Aljamain Sterling. That's it, right? So
And
I
that was a
just
weird. We had a weird fight where title changed hand by disqualification. We had a first round submission by Amanda Nunes.
Mhm.
And then we had Jan Blachowicz pretty much figuring Israel Adesanya out and ending the undefeated streak.
Yep, absolutely. So I just think it's time to pay the piper and just say, "Hey, the champions retain." I think so. And now, of course, Andrade has power, right? She has power, but
So
beyond
does
the power,
Shevchenko.
yes, exactly, right? There's more tools at the disposal of Valentina Shevchenko. I mean, if Andrade wanted to beat a Shevchenko, Antonina, she's there, which I believe she beat in her last fight. I want to say maybe no,
Andrade?
yeah, maybe not.
No.
Okay,
Chukagian.
Chukagian. Okay, even still, right? If it's a Shevchenko that you want to beat, you
Antonina.
go
Because the thing about Antonina is, she has some grappling skill, but she's still primarily more of the striker
striking.
type. They were from
Absolutely.
the Muay Thai. And Shevchenko's, still her base. Her knees are still deadly. And you don't want to battle her in the clinch. You don't want to taste one of those kicks like Jessica I did. But I think Shevchenko has done a great job in incorporating the grappling into her game. I mean, look at the second Nunes fight. A lot of people still believe that Shevchenko won that fight, myself
Hmm.
included.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about one of the best, female athletes, and considering, talents like we mentioned Roxanne Modafferi before, and like she could have been back in title contention after the Macy Barber upset, but now
Yep.
she's lost a couple and she's out of it. So the flyweight division is cleaning itself out. There's not going to be much more after Shevchenko. I'm predicting Shevchenko is going to win this. Probably Andrade's probably going to be too tough to finish. She'll
Yeah.
probably get a decision here, but Shevchenko, what's going to be left for her afterwards? Does the winner of Whaley Rose step up to try to challenge her? Does
That
she
could be
go?
yeah.
I'd say, does she go down? I mean, I think the fight really to make, considering they both clean out the divisions, is the trilogy fight, and especially considering that the controversy of the second fight. But for whatever reason, because I remember Dana saying this back, when the pandemic was going on, they still do not want to book this rematch between this trilogy fight between Nunes and Shevchenko. And I think if Nunes is truly, towards the end of her career, and they know it's gonna be a retirement fight, why not?
Why not? Exactly. Now, one of the things that also persists, at least in my mind, with Shevchenko, as well as it does Zhang Weili, is the fact how fluid. Oh my gosh, how fluid! Yes, Andrade has power here, right? But yes, Shevchenko has power, but the fluidity of those strikes, the transitions, all that stuff, like looking at the embeddeds and whatever, just how fluid. Like I remember, Lyoto Machida during when he was at his peak, or Anderson Silva, right? Just the fluidity, right? They can do such complex things so
Mhm.
effortlessly, and you try to do it on the Monday after their particular fights and everything, and it was all.
So you try to do it at your local dojo, and it just doesn't go right.
You look like Dodo in the dojo. That's exactly it. So yeah. I mean, Andrade, like you said, Thomas, like she's going to be tough to put away, but I don't want to live in a world where Valentina Shevchenko doesn't win this fight, because I just think she has more tools at her disposal. And again, it's slightly one dimensional with Andrade, right? So
Mhm.
it's no longer mixed martial arts is if
Well,
Andrade wins.
you ever hear the term in baseball five tool player about some of the best, athletes there? They can hit, they can do the fielding, they can run very well. Well, Valentina Shevchenko is the equivalent of that. She can knock you out from distance. She could brutalize you in the clinch. Caitlin Shikagian, she brutalized from top position on the ground. No matter where the action goes, Shevchenko has something in her toolbox, in her school set. So I just think Valentina, not that Andrade isn't good, but the fact is Valentina Shevchenko is the woman. She is the woman in this division.
That
She is
much
the
better.
upper echelon. Yes.
That much better. So there's levels to this ish, and that she's hand and feet over everyone else. So
Absolutely. All right. Here we go. This, as I say, we'll get to the main events, but if you want my honest opinion, this is the main event. Weili Zhang, Rose Namajunas, strawweight title on the line. Weili Zhang's first fight in over a year. Her first fight since that amazing war of attrition with Joanna Jędrzejczyk at 248, that amazing war, which in my opinion, just from the fights that I have watched, the greatest women's MMA fight I have ever seen. Definitely the greatest women's fight in UFC history. I'd say I don't know about MMA when you can talk about, all the other fights that have happened in Japan and in Strikeforce and Bellator, but like out of just the UFC fights in the octagon, Wiley Zhang, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. If you have not somehow seen that fight in the last year, I don't know what you've been doing during this pandemic. Uh, but it's her first fight since then. And then Rose Namajunas. Yeah, I mean, we talk about Joanna, her dominant reign. It all came to the end at Madison Square Garden. First round TKO at the hands of Rose Namajunas. And then Rose edged her out in the rematch in Brooklyn. And then, of course, the loss to Andrade almost a year later because she had a long layoff. And then she had another long layoff again before the rematch, which Namajunas ended up taking a decision there. So two women who have had fairly long layoffs, not just in terms of like this fight, but just in their recent times have had long layoffs. But you talk about two beasts at strawweight. Well, here you go. Look at tail of the tape. An inch in height to Namajunas. 2 inches in reach to Namajunas. So, Mr. Woods, break down this epically anticipated fight in this one.
this is amazing because again, you talked about the recipient of UFC Fight of the Year of 2020 in Weili Zhang and one Joanna
Go on,
Jędrzejczyk.
yep.
Right, absolutely. And then the person who thwarted the almost invincible juggernaut that was, Jędrzejczyk. It's amazing. This is like a match made in MMA heaven, right? But here's the fact of the matter is, right? Zhang Weili basically came out of nowhere, right, to cement herself in the division and become its champion, right? Where Rose Namajunas, when she lost the title, unfortunately, she contemplated retirement, right? She didn't know if she wanted to do that
She didn't.
anymore.
She wasn't able to handle the pressures of being champion. I mean, like we just mentioned, I think of 223, and she was already shaken up when facing Joanna at the second time around because she was involved in the red corner bust, which Conor McGregor threw the dolly into, and it ended up causing Michael Chiesa and Ray Bork to fall out of their fights at that time. So she was shaken up from that. Took a year off. Ended up now. We talk about the loss to Andrade that first time around, but if you remember, she put on a hell of a striking display in that first round that people actually debated 10-8 Namajunas, that she could have already been off to a fantastic start. And of course, Namajunas did win the rematch. So, you know, and actually, we're to go back to what we were saying before. We were talking about grappling and at the very start of the stream because we were talking about the fighters from China and Rose Namajunas, great with her grappling. The thing is with Weili Zhang, She also, and I actually wrote this in my fan sided preview for this fight, she delivers unbelievable pressure. She will, as much as Rose will come after her looking for the takedown attempts, and her takedown defense, with Zhang's meaning, will be tested in this one. Weili Zhang is not going to stop throwing strikes for the 25 minutes. She is
Mhm.
going to bring everything she can, from jabs to crosses to elbows to hooks to Rose Namajunas. She is going to test Namajunas' chin in this one.
Yeah, and Thug Rose is not going to go down easy, but she's going to go down. I just think that, the crazy thing about, the champion in this particular instance is she's happy. She's happy. It doesn't feel like it's taxing on her mentality, taxing on her body, even though it is, right? Zhang Weili is one of those people who she transcends language barrier. There's 10-minute clips of her trying to learn English, and you're just like, oh my gosh, she's adorable. She's opened up a fan base for her way beyond the auspices of just MMA, just UFC. She is a star, right? So again, for somebody that can't handle the pressure and she wants to step back into a title fight with it, I think somewhere along the way, she's going to question her principle, question her motives, and like, do I really want it again? And at the same time, those faithful punches from the champion are going to waylay her, and something in her brain will shut off.
And you mentioned, about how some of these martial artists, especially these who come from China, about the mission of just wanting to get better, as martial artists and get better as people. I remember watching the UFC, one of these UFC series where they replay the old fights, and before, I think it was Unleashed. No, it wasn't Unleashed because it wasn't the full card. I think it was just a UFC, oh man, I forget the name of the show, but it was, they were looking at the Weili Zhang Joanna Jędrzejczyk fight, and they had all the hype stuff behind it before the fight started. So they showed them, each training, and you see Weili Zhang, just slow, like what you see in a typical martial arts one style traditional dojo, slow, focusing on the movements, studying in focus, as much as Rose Namajunas is great with the grappling and probably had the grappling edge here, who's not to say that Weili Zhang has not been practicing her takedown defense? I think Weili Zhang and her team are fairly smart in that they know what Rose Namajunas can bring. And that's why a lot of people are expecting Rose to win this fight, even though she is the underdog. Like, this is one of those where I'm seeing a lot of picks for the underdog, which is kind of not the underdog. Is That's so weird to say. But I am like you. I am expecting that Weili Zhang has practiced her wrestling game and her grappling game and will be able to handle the takedown attempts. She's handled like a couple of the takedown attempts that have come her way so far. Like, she hasn't had many come at her, but when they do, she has stopped most of them, if not all of them. So I am expecting she's not going to defend every takedown from Rose, but I think Weili Zhang will be able to handle herself in this fight. I think it's going to be very close. I think we may even go to split decision range, but I think Whaley will pull this off. But if there's one thing that I can bet my money on, if there's one thing, one prediction I can make that's going to be locked in, here's your fight of the night. Here it is.
Mm-hmm.
Here it is right here. I will expect big things from this outing. I
I
cannot wait for this one.
couldn't agree with you more.
I know the early prelims are about to get started, but we have one more fight to get into. It is the actual main event of the evening. Kamaru Usman, Jorge Masvidal 2 for the welterweight championship of the world. Usman won the belt from Tyron Woodley at 235, defended against Covington in a hell of a fight with a fifth round finish, the latest in welterweight title history. Ended up taking a one-sided decision from Masvidal, that late notice Fight Island fight. Gilbert Burns, Usman took Burns' best shots and early on in the opening seconds of the fight, came back to get a third round finish. You were talking about, like, there's a whole debate between him and GSP, but when you consider it's one of those things where it's like two different eras, because GSP won the belt and was challenging for the belt in like his opening fights, like in his fourth UFC fight. Usman had to work his way up from winning tough into getting the title shot. And now he is on one of the most massive winning streaks. He hasn't lost a fight since his second MMA fight. But of course, he wants Masvidal. Why? Because he wants to finish, number one, like he was saying in that post-fight promo against Burns. And you know what? Money. Masvidal is money. He wants another payday, and I don't blame him. Usman is probably the biggest winner here. He gets a guy who he's already beaten, and he's going to get a big payday from all the pay-per-view buys because Masvidal's star. Now, we can have a debate about his star because this card doesn't feel like it has had the hype that, say, 251 had with Fight Island. Let's say Conor McGregor, the Dustin Poirier 2 had. Even Conor versus Cowboy had. Like, this is definitely a different kind of feel. But at the same rate, it is still Masvidal. And we know Masvidal's story, the big 2019 where he turned his fortunes around, the knockout of Darren Till, the knockout of Ben Askren. But at this rate, I guess it's easy to knock out Ben Askren considering Jake Paul just did it. But as much as I make fun of Ben Askren, who finishes Nate Diaz? Apparently he did. Apparently the New York State Athletic Commission doctor did too. So there you go. He is the BMF. He's still promoting himself as the BMF. The UFC is still promoting him as the BMF. So, his star is still there. But this is an opportunity for, let's face it, this is either an opportunity where Masvidal can finally capture that championship that he has long been waited for, is arguably one of the better fighters to have never win a championship in mixed martial arts, at least in the big leagues. And then you got Usman, who, as we just said, he's on a mission out to declare himself as the greatest welterweight of all time. Beating this guy in a rematch, beating Colby Covington in a rematch, maybe even getting his second belt during his career, that's going to go ways to making Usman as one of the best here. So, my friend, one more time here today. Give me your take.
Oh my gosh, this is a battle not just for the UFC Welterweight Championship. This is the title of who was the worst and most boring, according to Woods, appearances on Joe Rogan's Experience. These two, 5 minutes in, I could not decipher because I'm a fan of the English language. My mom is Fijian and we grew up with the Queen's English, and then we grew up around the U.S. version of it, which is right. But so here's the deal. I mean, everybody was talking about, and I was surprised when they did the weigh-ins and all of the stuff with the fans, whatever. How the press conference, how praise that Masvidal was. Now, yes, of course, he's from Miami. They're in Jacksonville. It's a short little hike up the road, down the road, so to speak. I don't know the schematics of Florida. I'm glad I don't. Alligators and I could get shot. So, yeah, well. But with that all being said, I was surprised, right? And everybody is saying all across all of the interwebs that, Masvidal's improved so much because he's got a full camp and all that jazz, right? But here's one thing that people don't put into play is the fact that, again, Usman was preparing for a full fight camp with Burns as the opponent. He had to switch gears in a matter of days, right? We're pretending that Masvidal was the only one, right? In addition to that, in the theory of Masvidal improving, he's the only one that's improved. You don't think that Usman has improved? Guess what? Colby Covington tried to get into his head. What happened to Colby Covington, right? They
got into a striking war. They're both wrestling experts, but they had one of the hell of a striking battle. And Usman won that.
And where did Colby, with all of his taunts and all of his kind of again trying to get into Usman's head, what was the prevailing image that we had of Colby Covington after his battle?
Him running away from the octagon.
Exactly, 100%, right?
And that's the thing about Usman is he's just so dominant. Sure, the Tyron Woodley of 2019 was still not of that old school Tyron Woodley that we saw in the loss to Luque, when we were saying that we wanted out for years. But just the simple fact that he dominated Woodley, like, regardless of if it was Prime Woodley or the later stage of Woodley, nobody dominated Woodley like Usman did. And Usman took Gilbert Burns, like we just said. He was rocked in the opening seconds of that fight.
Mm,
He took it. He came back right away, delivered his own strong striking. Usman, I mean, this guy right now is the welterweight GOAT. Well, not, let me be careful, the modern welterweight GOAT, because
mm,
GSP, but the point I'm getting at is I don't know who can beat Usman in this division. I don't think it's going to be Masvidal. It's not. I don't think it's going to be Covington or Burns. I love Stephen Thompson. Probably not him. Who? I mean, we still have
no.
ways to go to see if it's somebody like Jeff Neal or somebody. But like current guys I'm thinking of, current potential title contender. Michael Chiesa, probably not. Probably
No.
not Neil Magny.
Oh no, and it's funny, right? I think they're gonna have to call up the creators of Real Steel, from the Hugh Jackman movie, or one of the Robot Wars people, and put a welterweight title, kind of get him classified as a human versus robot and whatever. That's who beats Usman. And I'm not the biggest Usman fan at all by any stretch of the imagination. He's boring. He's cringy. Like again, that promo at the press conference. Like I could, finish him, but that's not the plan. To a chorus of booze. Good lord, man.
I just say I know Masvidal has the hometown edge, and a lot of people are going to be cheering for him. But if you want me honest, if Masvidal is to win this fight, it has to be by finish. I think the longer this fight goes, the more it's going to be in Usman's interest. I think if this fight ends in a decision, it's going to go to Usman. I think we're going to see one of two things happen tonight. We're either going to see Usman repeat the same success he had 10 pay-per-view events ago against Masvidal, use his wrestling and grappling, completely negate Masvidal's striking, and get a decision win. Whether people like it or not, and it's going to be a dominant win, and we are going to be talking about how Kamaru Usman, again, like I just mentioned, that who can beat him. Or we are going to see either one of these two guys score a finish, and it's going to be like, a legacy maker for either of them, a highlight legacy making finish. But again, I see that one, I could see either a guy happening. But the longer the fight goes, and if it goes to decision, I see it more for Usman. So I'm going to say Kamaru Usman walks out. And like you were just saying at the beginning of recapping these title fights, how the last time we had 3 title fights, it was mostly and still should have been all 3, but then the Sterling thing happened. Here, I am going to say all 3, hashtag and still.
And still, no, 100%. And again, we're talking about the versatility and the cardio of Usman. This is a guy who long since annihilated his knees, right? We're talking about the cardio of a gentleman who, again, can't run theoretically. I mean, literally. So I can't wait for this. Again, I think the 2 title fights, the women's title fights, will be the ones that we're left talking about out of these the 3 title fight kind of pizzazz. And yeah,
plus all the young talent that either going to be debuting or just still working their way up, from Sabatini, Zhu Rong, Na Liang, Ariane Carnelasi, Brendan Allen, Carl Roberson, Tristan Connolly. There's a lot. Dwight Grant. There's a lot of young names on the preliminary card to be watching out for, and that's about to start right now with the first fight.
Yes,
so,
absolutely. You know what? If I'm Dana White right now, I say cut your losses. You cut everybody on this card a $50,000 check before before their walkout, and just do it, because this is a banger.
I can't wait for this. Hopefully, it meets all our expectations. I can't wait. So everybody go enjoy the show. Mr. Accordington Woods, thank you so much again for joining me. I am honored to be in your presence. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thomas, I'm going to figure out which way it is, but Thomas Albano, go ahead and follow him and Empty the Bench at all of the social medias. It's one of my favorite podcasts. It's everything. It's wrestling, it's MMA, it's traditional sports here in North America. You want to do that. And what in the whole following principle, again, according to Woods, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and all of the social medias to find this guy who has a face for radio, but I'm making do.
Oh man, it is an absolute. I love being on streams with this guy, and like I said, he'll be with me for all the pay-per-view previews. So you'll see him next month for 262 when we're in Houston. You'll see him the month after for 263 for the Vegas for the trilogy. So it's gonna be fun. All right, I'm not gonna waste any more people's time.
I can't wait. Let's go. Ah!
All right, everyone, enjoy the show tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.